Welcome back to the third press conference for my third public petition here in Austria. This is the English pre-briefing here at the Press Club Concordia, and I'm greeting all my friends at my YouTube channel. I have prepared obviously now with the American flag after I had the European flag and of course the NATO flag. I'm campaigning continuously for NATO membership of Austria, for of course pro-European Austria that opens the labor market towards the Ukrainians permanently, towards all candidate countries permanently, because this is what we should do as Europeans to support EU integration and unity in Europe as an answer to the Russian war. It's now basically, tomorrow is 1 year, tonight it's the 23rd and it's the 24th when Russia attacked in the morning and started this huge scale, terrible, genocidal war of aggression against Ukraine and this attack on the European peace system. And I'm here now with my third initiative. This is about the trade system. I call it also the opening of the trade system towards the West, a yes to the EU FTA with Mercosur and of course with America, the famous TTIP agreement. I'm since 20 years campaigning for exactly this agreement and I hope that it will now come. We need a free trade agreement with our American allies. We need it in America, of course, it's also not so easy. We need it in Europe, but this kind of absolute protectionist country, Austria, must also say a clear yes to the free trade agreement with the United States of America and in a package obviously with Mercosur, with the African Union, with the Gulf Cooperation Council, with Uzbekistan, with Australia, with New Zealand, with India, with the ASEAN states like Philippines and Indonesia first of all, and with Pakistan, and I think I mentioned the Gulf Cooperation Council already. So this is the opening to the world, because this French protectionist, Austrian protectionist model has failed. And we have too long bought energy and other stuff from Russia because it was cheap. We have funded their terrible genocidal war and their preparation. And still today Austria is buying a lot of Russian stuff. And I call for a boycott of Russia. This is very timely because we're a complete boycott. We should EU-wide boycott Russia and we should do that fast. And we should phase out all Russian import by the end of 2023, and we should stop buying gas, uranium especially. Of course, we should not work anymore with the Russian nuclear energy company, which is corrupting Hungary and building a dangerous nuclear power plant next to Austria, just 300 kilometers, with Russian corruption done by Orban, who is so closely involved with Russia. And so this is the big problem. So we should basically adopt our trading system to the so-called Zeitenwende. It's an English term now as well, the change of time, the adoption to the new realities, and we need to do it in several sectors and factors. Especially, of course, I have already said in security area, we need to join NATO, Malta should join NATO, Ireland should join NATO, the European Union should join NATO, Cyprus should be united as a federal state in the EU and also join NATO, and of course Ukraine should join NATO. Yes, absolutely. After the liberation of Mariupol, it's time to join NATO, and this should happen already this year. And then we need to give the weapons for that, and of course we need to give the physical support for that. I was calling already for a big European package of 2 trillion euro for the reconstruction and for the armament of Ukraine, and that's really very important, and we need to do that now. We need to do that fast. We are again very slow. We think we are good, but we are far from what we should achieve, and America is much better than us, but also America is not doing enough. We actually have to do much more in terms of military supply and also in terms of fiscal supply for Ukraine to have victory and liberation of Mariupol, NATO integration, but also Kosovo must be in NATO, also Bosnia, also Austria, also Moldova, obviously, never forget Moldova. This is all very important, and that's in the defense sector. In the trade sector, we need, of course, Zeitenwende, meaning the opening of the West, the boycott of Russia, the embargo of Russia. They can do what they want with the Chinese, but please not with us. And we should stop buying Russian goods. We should also disinvest from Russia completely by end of 2023. That's very important in the trade and in the economic sector, that Zeitenwende. And then we have, of course, the Zeitenwende as well in the energy sector to really change towards European energy independence away from Russia completely. Austria has again completely failed in these three categories of Zeitenwende. And we have also the EU policy. The EU has lived up to its to the necessities, and the EU has actually done a lot. But always Austria was on the weak side, on the last side, and they have not really done a lot. And I have been very critical to that. And I say Austria should open the labor market. Why the labor market? Because that's the thing the Austrians can do, because it's national competence mainly. And so we have, of course, given the EU candidate country status to Ukraine and Moldova and to Bosnia, should also go to Kosovo and also to Georgia, obviously now very fast. But what we need to do is also to make sure that the labor market is open to all the EU candidate status. But also in that sector we failed. There were some minor openings in the point system for some of the Southeastern Europeans, but the general opening has not happened. Actually, I have to apologize. I misinformed some of my friends internationally because I thought Austria has come to reason due to the ORF statement, but it was not the case, and I call for that. But we failed as well, unfortunately, in this category. And today is the tragic day when the 18 Russian parliamentarians are invited and allowed to dance at the OSCE event here at the Parliamentary Assembly. Well, we have kicked them out from the Council of Europe. So I'm completely critical to this decision of Minister Schallenberg. It is absolutely outrageous that they are allowed to dance in Vienna here at this OSCE event and sit in these conferences, and he is not taking the blame, he says, and it's illegal to not issue visa. You know, that's absolutely wrong. Of course, you know, we are at war. Of course, we can deny visas to the enemy. Russia is the enemy. They have broken European peace. They have done genocide in Ukraine. And of course, they must be consequently attacked and not attacked, but denied a visa. Attacked, that's too much. That's even for me too much. Anyhow, that's really what needs to be done. We need to deny their visas for the Russian OSCE delegation, and I will go after this event. I will go to a protest against the decision of the foreign minister of Austria to issue visas for the Russian delegation, because this is really outrageous. So that's very important. This kind of kowtowing to Russia must end, and we have a long tradition in Austria for doing that since 45, since Russia liberated us first and then occupied, and then they were still our kind of big supervisor power for too long, and the mentality of Austria has not changed, and that's connected to this neutrality. And I will also explain many of the reasons why the Austrian mentality is like this, because we have not been fully re-educated. We have been still continuing in this ideological mix of Soviet kind of nostalgia and of kind of also this anti-Americanism, this anti-capitalism, this anti-Semitism. It's all very, very strong in Austria still today. And that's why we have this protectionist, almost irrational hate of America, this hate of American free trade agreement, this hate for the Mercosur agreement. This is because we have this dumb kind of low-level protectionism in the Austrian politics. We have virulent anti-Americanism in Austria, which I apologize deeply for it. I'm very sorry for it, and I fight it consequently since 40 years because I was also more in this Reagan, when he saved us from the Soviets. I was on that side, and I'm still on that side, and I'm very happy actually with Mr. Biden's very strong speech in Poland and in Ukraine. The visit was historic. Thanks America for fighting and for funding and for supporting free Europe now in Ukraine. But you did all the time since the intervention, since the arsenal of democracy actually to fund the resistance of the Western allies, and then the intervention and the liberation from the Nazis. Then of course the containment of the Soviets, and then the intervention for the liberation of Kosovo, of Bosnia, and now of Ukraine. Thanks a lot, America. And I really deeply detest and hate all these anti-Americans in Austria. They are all the same, you know, from the extreme left. Yeah, it is. There's a Christian anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism. You know, there is a very strong socialist anti-Semitism. There is this nationalistic. Austrian kind of whatever you can call it, this xenophobic nationalism in Austria, all these terrible forms and streams of unredeemed ideological leftover of the past, many still connected to the greatest anti-Americans in history. Obviously, that was Hitler and Stalin. They hated America and they hated everything America stands for. They hated it for its success, for its ability to contain the Nazi and the Soviet ideology, and for the success, obviously. And then we have, unfortunately, in Austria, the debate about the role of America has always been blurred by this neutrality lie. And then we are left over here today in 2023, when I'm, as a pro-NATO activist, then accused of everything bad in the world. And that's very, very shameful. I'm consequently on track for being pro-American, pro-NATO, pro-EU, and pro-Euro, obviously, and against Russia. But even that, I was in the 90s very much involved in pro-Russian activities, in transformation with the opposition. But we lost the civil war in Russia against Putin, and he took over brutally. He kills his enemies wherever he can, and he wages terrible wars. And then Mr. Schallenberg is inviting the MPs to the OECD. No, I call for the Russians to be excluded from the OECD. We don't need them here. Once they have stopped fighting, the Russians, then we can anyhow negotiate easily with them once they have come to terms and they have declared defeat, yeah. But we will not make any compromise Ribbentrop agreement with the Russians, so they don't need in OECD, absolutely. We kick them out of Council of Europe, and that's the logic. Why not from OECD? So no need to invite them. And on the energy, I call for the breaking of the big gas agreement, a very corrupt agreement, which was concluded in 2018, which puts Austria under the servitude of Russia. We always have to pay, take or pay, it's called, and we have it for many billions. It's no miracle that we have again in 2002, in this 22 last December, we have again the highest level of energy import from Russia. Because technically the pipelines were restored, they were sending the gas, and we had to take it because of this contract which Sebastian Kurz, under the tutelage of Wolfgang Schüssel, have concluded in 2018. And of course the Austrians don't want to break it, because then Russia will expose all the compromise that they have about the Austrian political elite, from the Greens president starting towards also the Mr. Schüssel, who is since 2006 and the facilitator, let's call it, because they tend to try to sue me like some Austrian publicist serving Russia. He's now trying to sue me, Mr. Voltron, because I called him an agent of Russia, but he is an agent of influence of Russia. I don't know, of course, if they are paid, but they are all connected to the Austrian state sector, Voltron, Schüssel, and obviously there's massive monetary flows. It's probably not directly that the embassy goes with money to them. The Russian embassy does that as well, I'm sure, but mostly they are profiting via commissions and via consulting agreements with the state sector, or they were former employees and receive pensions there, and then they serve these ex-masters of them involuntarily or voluntarily on a paid or not paid basis. But this is what this works, and most logically on a paid basis. And please, Wolfgang Schüssel and Klaus Voltron, you can sue me. You're very welcome. I'm happy to have the platform of court proceedings against the former chancellor, or the famous Krone publicist who can spread his venom in the Kronenzeitung on a weekly basis, his hate against America and his hate against everything that the free world is built on. And he does that on a weekly basis on a big platform towards millions. So if you want to sue me, you're very welcome. Here I am. And let's play that game. Good. This is the basic intro of my press conference. I will talk about the various dimensions. I will call for the break of the OMV contract with Austria. Obviously, we have to nationalize this gas import, we have to take the bitter pill. We can defund it then, because we have to at the same time confiscate all Russian assets in Austria, and we anyhow have to somehow take. We have to compensate the Austrian companies who are disinvesting from Russia on state order, which I'm calling for. They must be compensated to some extent at least, and the Russians will do whatever they want with the Raiffeisenbank Russia and the VMV Russia and all these assets. But anyhow, they cannot repatriate the profits, and the idea that one day there will be a settlement is absolutely ludicrous. There will be no peace settlement with Russia. Russia actually is on the complete decline. If you have followed the recent speeches, just one, let me sip my coffee. Yes, exactly, that's the situation, and that's what I'm calling for. I will also, you have seen my speech on the dismantlement of Russia. I will also introduce this idea to the Austrian media, and I will obviously call for weapons, Austrian weapons. Yesterday I was at the Austrian American Society, and I had the opportunity to put one of the questions, and I was very critical that we don't believe the tanks for Ukraine. We have 50 tanks. Then the colonel said, but they will be repaired, they are not old, because I basically argue these are anyhow old tanks, they are from the 80s, they can easily be transformed, given to Ukraine now, and then we buy new modern battle tanks. The same for our airplanes. We can easily give the Eurofighters, we hope the Ukraine can use them, give them all to Ukraine, what we have in old military equipment, and let's buy new ones. Yeah? There are new Leopards, there are new F-35. Actually, the F-35 is now coming in June under the Maine agreement, because we have now, Austria has an agreement with Maine, the National Guard of Maine. So we are anyhow gradually ready for NATO preparations, but the Austrian public is unfortunately not prepared, because we have a big group of softies. These are the people who have written a second open letter now. They excluded me from the second open letter actually, because they said I'm too radical, pro-NATO. You know, in a security debate about the arrangements of your security, you can either be neutral or you can be in NATO. There is no European third way, like it's totally crazy. Nobody wants that in Europe. Yeah? Austria is the problem here. Malta is the problem. Ireland is the problem. Cyprus is the problem. Finland is the settlement and the future, and they have done it. Sweden as well. Now today was in the news that Finland and Sweden are going to join NATO. Finally, Turkey will agree. And again, Orban is then the last one, because he is a paid agent of Russia, and he is very much a paid agent. I don't know about Voltron, I'm sure about Schüssel, but I'm sure that Orban is very much paid agent, and he is working against us everywhere, and against the West. And he is from this Croatian president, which he has now on his payroll towards Vucic, and he has now made massive interventions in the Austrian political system, in the ÖVP, to take Nehammer into his tutelage system and his funding system. And of course he has always this idea that he is successful, and he is with anti-migration very successful. And the Austrian People's Party and Mr. Nehammer, since the summer, they have artificially blown up the migration numbers. They have artificially blown up, of course, the migration crisis in order to deflect from the Ukraine war, because that was not helpful for their master. And so they have done this artificially, and they have then also started this totally unnecessary Schengen crisis. And they have, in the service of Putin and Orban, and they have started to do that. And they have, to this day, we're now at the anniversary of this tragic war. Tomorrow it is, and tonight. And then we have the situation where they have basically blocked and continues to block the Schengen entry of Romania and Bulgaria, which is so important for European unity. And they are continuing to do that, and that's completely unacceptable, and I'm really very sorry, and I call them to end this veto and allow Romania and Bulgaria in Schengen. And I repeat that it would be extremely helpful if Romania, would recognize Kosovo in exchange, because that's a big step and a big sign, and also Slovakia, obviously, Cyprus, Greece and Spain and Ukraine and Kosovo and Bosnia and Serbia as well, and everybody to Euroize, and we to adopt the euro in all these countries, obviously from Romania to join the Eurozone, also in Bulgaria, but also then in Ukraine and Moldova and in Georgia, and of course in as well Albania, and also in Macedonia and Bosnia. That would be really helpful, and that's why I was in Albania recently, last week, to call for the euro for Albania, to make more pressure on Serbia, because there is now this fantasy agreement of the appeasers in America around Biden, which unfortunately he has with Jack Sullivan. I'm very pro-American, but it's a fact, and with also this Derek Chollet, and they try to appease Serbia, and they believe that Serbia will then join the sanctions and do some kind of bilateral agreement on the German treaty basis with Kosovo, which is the total wrong precedent, because we shouldn't do that, because it's of course the Croatian or Slovenian precedent which is relevant, and not the German, because Kosovo will never be part of Serbia again, and it's not a German unification model in the future to be on the illusion basis. And if we have now the opportunity, we should definitely go into the direction of full recognition, and that's what I'm calling for. And so I will continuously campaign for the recognition of Kosovo. And thanks a lot for this very nice media report in the Kosovo television about me, and for the 15 years anniversary. That was really very good. I will now also go in this press conference here in German a bit in the globalization issue, why it was very successful, because all these things seem to be not so clear in the Austrian public, that we have achieved 100 trillion world economy, that we have achieved 8 billion people, that is a major success, that trade is good, trade is a force for the good, and that the WTO is good, it must be enlarged and not reformed, and the enlargement is important. Trade agreements of the EU are very important, we need more of them, and that's what I will explain now, and especially TTIP, obviously, and that is completely to be rejected, the Austrian protectionism of the Greens and of the Austrian Christian Democrats, and this yes to the Westwende and to the end of Russia energy imports, to the break of this contract, and EU enlargement obviously to 37, the UK to return, that's very important, and also to have a clear no to Orban's kind of Central European pro-Russian alliance, and that is very important. So I will go for all these things. I will also call here for observer elections to be organized in all 9 EU candidate countries. That will be my campaign, and I will continue for the 16th of March. That is the European Commemoration Day for Mariupol genocide. That was the most heinous crime of Russia. And of course we have to stop appeasing Russia, but we have to contain Russia, and we have to also remove Russia out of the UN Security Council, because what we need is to have India instead. India must be in, Russia must be out of the UN Security Council, and we have to work and prepare for the breakup of Russia. Russia will be 32 or 36 different states, that varies, and we have to de-recognize Russia, and we have to prepare for that we learn the names of the new republics, and like from Siberia, Yakutia, Karelia, Dagestan, Kuban, and there are so many of them, Amur and Sakha and Tatarstan and Bashkortostan, and so many of them. I have also this wonderful quote from Reagan: "My strategy in the Cold War, we win, we lose." I adopted it. My strategy for 2023 war is the West wins, Russia will lose, and Russia will be dismantled, and freedom works, Putin kaputt. Putin kaputt, obviously, in allusion to this famous statement of Hitler kaputt, because he's behaving similar. And I will also protest against Schallenberg's unworthy and below any kind of standards submission gesture of allowing the Russian MEPs to dance here in Vienna at the OECD. they should be excluded, and also Kosovo should be inside the OECD. That is a much better policy. But what Mr. Schallenberg is doing is in his line of his recent activities, because he was always very close to Russia and to Iran, and he is in the tradition of this appeasement. And Austria still today is a hub for spying, and that's very unfortunate. And we have tradition in that one, and that should also be ended. Yes, 23 years of anti-Americanism and pro-Russian politics under the cover of neutrality has to be ended, and that's what I'm calling for. And we have a very sad and unfortunate tradition from the visit of shame of 2014, when Putin was already attacking Donbass and has annexed Crimea. We invited him still to Vienna. Then, of course, this friendship between Schüssel and Putin, I just say Deripaska. I remember that Firtash is in Vienna still today. Why he's not extradited? And that's unacceptable. And then we have, of course, this huge story about Ibiza, the President Pellen's visit before it in Sochi, and this gas contract of 2018, which we still pay so dearly. The problems with the confiscation of Russian property, Deripaska's ski villa, and all these other things. The visit in St. Petersburg at the Forum, and and the visit of Karl Nehammer, the only Prime Minister of Europe who is going during the war in April to negotiate with Putin, and all these Russian properties with Navalny has made the video on. You can all watch it, and also the dancing at the wedding. And I have started a bit to analyze why this all is, and I told you already, anti-capitalism rampant, anti-Americanism from the right, from the left, and of course this protectionism, this neutrality lie of Austria, the populism, the lack of information about European, for example, trade agreement and how beneficial they are for the Austrian economy, for the Austrian people, for the consumers, for the citizens, for everybody. Yeah? This has not been explained, and we always fight against Europe in our minds as if Europe would be an occupying power or so, and then Russia, it's so bad, and I'm continuously since 30 years working against that. And all this Soviet nostalgia and this right-wing Putin love, this is also disgusting. So I'm finished with that. So I have this podcast here, and I do these media events. I now will also try to work longer to develop something like the Atlantic Association of Austria. There are not many people here in Austria who are pro-American and pro-NATO, but I have now 2,889 signatures for NATO accession. I have now 400 for the labor market and 99 for the US FTA. And I'm a modest individual. I try to get organized now. My idea is to create the Austrian Atlantic Council. That is basically part of the Atlantic Treaty Association, which exists in most countries in Europe and the NATO members and the Partnership of Peace. But in Austria, obviously, it seems not to exist, to my best knowledge. Nobody told me, and I have looked around. So that's now the idea, and I will continue to serve also the interest of Kosovo and of Bosnia and of Ukraine and the EU NATO membership, and that's exactly what I'm going to do, to have more unity in Europe as an answer to the Russian war, and that's what we need very urgently, and that's what I'm doing. So I call for more unity in Schengen, NATO, in trade, in labor market, more unity, more openness. This is the answer to the Russian war. And of course, for victory of Ukraine and Europe, we need more American partnership. We need more arms for Ukraine. We need less neutrality, actually no neutrality, Mr. Dengler, just to make that very clear. And we have here the euro for everybody. And so it's quite simple. The unity and all our instruments work. The West works. We just need to be more united. All our instruments must be available for everybody, from Schengen to the euro, and that's the logic of it all. And then we have to end all this Russian BRICS and all this negative Russian system, and of course Ukraine in NATO and in the EU. Good. Thanks a lot. And please, let's stay with America. Let's conclude a free trade agreement. Let's have another 30 years very successful of globalization together with America. The West will win and we will be very successful. Let's quadruple GDP in the next 30 years and let's be very successful together. Thanks a lot. Bye.